Oh, it's on. Okay, good. Yeah, I mean, we watch you guys talk about the show, you dissect it, you're living with the characters in a different way than we are as the writers. And so your comments are helpful, you know, as we work on the scripts. It's or they're helpful, for example, in trying to flash forward to season 3. And for instance, in the last episode, you guys were talking about, well, okay, Bumpy is now out to Doogie. You know, he owes a lot of money, and and you know what's funny is that hadn't been first thing on my mind in thinking about season 3, and then I was like, oh yeah, we're gonna actually have to resolve that. You know, straight up, we're gonna have to make that a problem. Excellent. And so that's one reason I'm also excited to be on, because you know, I have some questions for you guys as well.
Oh, nice.
All right. Okay, this is the first.
That is awesome.
Yes, indeed.
Well, to the viewers out there that watch our show, in case you guys, for some reason, have been missing out, this is Chris Brancato. He is the writer, and you also are the showrunner for GodFather of Harlem. And you are here with us. I mean, we're so grateful to have you and to discuss, and we're so happy and excited to hear that you watched us as well. So this is truly a treat.
Yes, it's a treat for me too. You guys do your show very professionally. It's exciting to watch.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I think, look, we didn't even introduce ourselves. I think you already know us, but
Luanda.
Luanda, hi, Chris.
I'm Tiffany. And you and I have engaged online.
Yes, we have.
And I'm the soul brother, and you can put that any way you like.
You have such a great voice, Ron. You have a nice bass voice.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate that. Really do. One burnt you, know that ain't cool. Wanna show you how I'm nothing like him. Swear that's the truth. You can't trust that I won't. Take it away.
All right, everyone. So first of all, I just want to start with some of the questions relating to GodFather of Harlem, because we have a ton of questions for you, but we want to get some of the show related ones up first. And so I think, Tiffany, you wanted to get us started with that?
Well, yeah, it's GodFather of Harlem related and also Bumpy Johnson related, because I know you wrote Hoodlum, and I was just watching that the other night, and I watch it every time it comes on. I love that show. I mean, that movie. And I just wanted to know, like, what interested you in writing about Bumpy Johnson?
Okay, this is an incredible story. I went to college with a guy named Paul Eckstein, a Black Jew from Brooklyn. Wow. And he and I became very fast friends. And when I expressed to him in my very early 20s a desire to be a screenwriter, he said, you know, you should do a movie about this guy, Bumpy Johnson. He sent my grandmother to secretarial school. And so Paul, and he said, you know, I watch movies. I'll watch, you know, Michael Corleone and The Godfather, Tony Montana and Scarface, you know, funny enough, played by the same actor. And he's like, I see a Hispanic representation of a gangster and I see a white representation of a gangster. Well, there should be a Black representation of a Don. And so, you know, and so he carried that passion, and he actually, you know, developed. I was busy, and I thought Bumpy Johnson, he spent 27 years of his life in jail. So, I didn't really see a movie there. So I actually passed on it. And he spent about 8 years working with various other writers, including some great ones, Lynn Nottage and others. And then ultimately he caught me at a certain point, and he gave me some research, and it talked about Bumpy's fighting against Dutch Schultz and Lucky Luciano. And that little segment of Bumpy's life interested me. So I said, let's do the movie in that sphere, Paul. And he said, yeah, let's do it. So I worked on the script with him, and ultimately we got Bill Duke and Lawrence Fishburne interested, and we went off and shot it, and there you go. At the time it didn't make a splash in the box office, but it has, it seems, in the African American culture, it seems to have resonated and been pretty well known. Mm-hmm. And I think that proves Paul's point. There needed to be a show about a Black Don. Then somebody came to me with Godfather of Harlem, the idea of doing Bumpy Johnson in the 60s as a TV show. And once again, I said, I'm going to pass. I've already done the character. I'm really busy. I have this other show about to go. And they said, well, you think Paul would be interested? And I said, yeah, you should ask him. Anyway, Paul ended up kind of warming the plate for 4 months. And the project that I thought was going to go fell through. And I call him and I go, hey, maybe we could take a look at this. Now, one of the producers was married to Forrest Whitaker's manager. So what was super interesting was, hey, do Bumpy Johnson in the 60s with Forrest Whitaker. And so I thought to myself, believe it or not, it's hard to sell Forrest Whitaker as the lead of a TV show. It seems in retrospect, of course, you'd want him in it, but it's actually not the easiest sell in the world. But but I thought, what? He would make a cool Bumpy Johnson. So Paul and I worked on that script. We created the show together. And so it's amazing. It's like my college friends' fascination with Bumpy is what led to these two, this movie and this TV show.
Wow.
Well, I think you guys absolutely got it right on that one, because I know you watch, we've been singing the praises about this show week after week after week. It's like, every time we think we found a favorite episode, we find the next week's one is just that much better.
And Chris, my father loves this show. My father loves this show.
Tiffany,
I don't know if you saw, I had him on last week.
Yes, I did see him, and I loved him on. And you got to tell him he was spitting truth, and I was very impressed, and also found a few of in fact, I found one thing he said. I was watching it with Michael Payne, my fellow writer, and I said, wow, man, I need to lift his dialogue for next season. Like, I have to have somebody say exactly what he just said. And Michael was like, oh, no, he'll end up suing you. I said, no, I'll ask Tiffany to ask him.
Look,
okay.
He would be so honored.
But when you say that, I think that's what we love about the show, is that it's a very smart, it's a very well-researched show that brings out the nuances and what was going on in that time period, the nuances that was going on with the characters and their relationships to each other. And so I think that's one of the things we appreciate, that the work and the time that you took to get it right. And so we would like you to speak to the importance of doing that. If you really want the work to live and to kind of have legs, the importance of doing that type of in-depth research and letting it show in the writing.
Well, you mentioned that a number of times in the episodes, the authenticity of the world. It's a very interesting thing we're doing here, which is that this is effectively historical fiction, because, I don't have access. There isn't much documentary research about Bumpy Johnson. There isn't a lot of any recordings of Bumpy and Malcolm talking, though they definitely were friends. And I've talked to friends of Bumpy's or lieutenants of Bumpy's. But the fact is, we have to create the show in order to make it dramatic. We have to take we have to create a story first. And then what we do is we go into, for instance, the Little Fruit Stand riot. That was an actual event in Harlem in 1964. And so we said, okay, how are we going to take this event and make it connect with our characters? Okay, well, let's have Elise and Margaret witness it on the way to school or on the way home from school. Let's have Bumpy get involved in it. let's have a crooked cop here, and and then what we do is we sort of laser in then, because we know what our story is basically going to be as it relates to our characters. So for example, there was a big debate. Who's the person? Are we caring about the teenagers who got beat up in the cell? Nah, it's just gonna, that's going to be a new actor you don't know. Let's take Cecil and put him in there. So it's this really curious blend of allowing the things that interest us in the research, in the historical, authentic truth, and then taking them and molding them, let's say, into this kind of clay, which is using fictional elements of dramatic writing to try to actually get to the spirit of the truth. That's what I think people react to. It's not the literal truth. I wasn't in a room with Adam Clayton Powell and Malcolm X down in Washington, D.C. But so it's my job as a writer to imagine what those guys might have said to one another based on what I know about them and their characters. In Malcolm's case, because he wrote a lot of speeches and he wrote a long autobiography, et cetera, it's much easier to put a lot of dialogue in his mouth that he actually said. So again, I'm putting him in certain fictional situations, but what he's saying is what he would have said or did say. So it's fun.
Well, let me say this: your artistic value is incredible, because with the Godfather of Harlem, it's gritty, it's historic, and in many ways prevalent to modern day. Now, would you say that the program addresses issues that plague the Black community even today? And I love the way that you portray that.
Well, Ron, that was part of my pitch. When I went to go try to sell the show, it was like, hey, to be honest, man, doing a show set in a period, it's hard to sell. Mm-hmm. It costs on your budget about $8 or $10 million more. Mm-hmm. So the only reason to ever do a period piece is if you're making a commentary about today. Mm-hmm. And this to me was so obvious. And by the way, we were developing and creating the show before the BLM movement, before George Floyd. Mm-hmm. But George Floyd happened between seasons, and it dramatically affected how we wrote the show in the second year. We knew we had a privilege and also a responsibility to now try to take this show into the next level of the political. We did that less in the first year. You got to know the characters a little bit, and now, and COVID actually had a really interesting effect on the show, which is obviously was horrible. Everybody had to wear protective gear. I went to the set 3 times only all year. I operated out of a little, apartment with like a feed to the cameras and connections to my editors, and so it was super intense, but we had to make the show smaller. We couldn't be shooting out in Manhattan streets or Harlem streets. So we built more sets. We built Chin's kitchen. We built Malcolm's entire home. Wow. And we sort of put the show more in the domestic life of these characters, because now you know them, you've seen them in action, and our scenes became a little bit longer. And that's the way we fought the COVID restrictions, but it actually made the show kind of better in some ways, more character driven.
Oh yeah, for sure. I feel like we were definitely more captivated and getting, like you said, more personal with the characters. And especially like just learning about the duality of these characters, because we always have this argument about like you fall in love with a character like Bumpy Johnson, but they're also detrimental to their community. And so it's like you have a love-hate relationship there, and it's seen throughout with many characters, even with Adam Clayton Powell's character, where he was admired for his political work, but his personal life was highly critiqued. And even Malcolm, some people loved him and hated him for the same reasons. And so it's like, it's awesome how you guys have just highlighted the duality of these characters.
Well, I think that's a very smart point to make, and it's true. I think that when one way that Paul and I described the series over time is, this is the education of Bumpy Johnson. Where is he going to take this? How long can you live with that duality? That duality is going to get challenged every single episode next year on some level, you know? And ultimately, what is the verdict of this show and us writers about the career of a man like this? You know, like, well, what are we trying to say at the end of this series when we do our final episode? In my humble hope, we do 60 episodes.
Well, I'd like to see 60 and more if possible. You know, and it
well, no, we'll have to do that'll be Ron. That'll be the Frank Lucas spinoff.
Oh, there you go.
Is there going to be a Frank Lucas spinoff?
Well, if you guys tell me there's a lot of excitement about that, then that may be the next thing we're doing.
I can tell you for sure. There'll be a lot of excitement.
Yeah.
You know, one of the lines that Bumpy had in this last episode, if not that, the one before, where he and Morgenthau were sitting getting their shoes done. And, you know, Morgenthau was more looking at the criminal aspect of Bumpy. And Bumpy, you know, said to him, look, I tried to go to law school. They wouldn't accept me. And so in a lot of ways, he was saying to Morgenthau, you know, what you see here on the surface is not the real man. You know, I'm here by circumstances that aren't necessarily mine. And I love that in the way it was presented to him. And so the writing is so realistic that, you know, you say it's not a truism, but to me, truism is a perspective. And the perspective that you give to the show is so real that it makes it, and by any other comparison, true.
Well, again, this is about our interest in exploring the roots of crime in all communities. I mean, what's really interesting is the Italian were the immigrants in the 1890s, 1910s, and there was a subset of their population who were involved in criminal activity as a means because they were discriminated against. They were immigrants. Now, the Black experience is very, very different because it wasn't a voluntary immigration to this country. So it's unique, but it also has some real parallels to other immigrant groups, you know, entering the culture through, at first, the only means to advance yourself economically, crime. When you can't get a medical school degree, when you can't get a law school degree, when you're discriminated against in the workplace, you have to turn to crime and satisfying the human vices. There's money there. And so I think the show, you know, to me, the vehicle the show provides is an opportunity to have characters like Morgenthau and Bumpy, or Bumpy and Malcolm, or Mamie and Elise, you know, discuss things that are relevant to, you know, the not only the Black experience in America, but the American experience in America. And so, you know, what I knew at the very beginning, with the genesis of the TV show, what was interesting was Paul had been working for a bunch of months, and I said, okay, can I dive in? And he said, yeah, I'd love that. And he handed me, you know, material, much like he had done 22 years earlier with Hoodlum. And I looked at some scribbles he had, and he had headlined one of his pages of notes, Bumpy and Malcolm. And it was just describing, you know, the relationship. And it was very strange, almost like it had happened when he gave me research 22 years ago. Bumpy and Malcolm just lifted off the page toward me. And I realized that my creative reluctance to just do another show where, like, the Black gangster beats the evil white mobsters, like, that's what I did in Hoodlum, and it's perfect there. But like, to do that again wasn't so interesting for me. But when I saw that Bumpy and Malcolm thing, it rose up off the page. It literally rose up, and I said, I know exactly what this show is. This show is the collision of crime and civil rights. And I didn't even know what those connections were, other than if Bumpy's a criminal and Malcolm's a political guy, then there's a connection between politics and crime for this show. And I knew that the executives who I have to pitch to in Hollywood to sell a show, I knew they'd never heard that before. When you're trying to sell a show today, if you can pitch in a single sentence something that sounds provocative and they've never heard of before, because trust me, they've heard everything. You know, you're going to maybe have a winner. And that was the reaction. They were like, oh shit, this is going to be a weird left ear, like the gangster show turned on its ear a little bit. And what we're going to watch is, you know, I think maybe a good way to describe the arc of Bumpy and Malcolm over the course of time is, you know, one has to get a little more political and one has to get a little more gangster.
Yeah, and so it's you walked right into the question that I had, because I was like, not only with the Godfather of Harlem, but some of your other work like Narcos, you see that connection between crime and politics and how they almost go hand in hand, and almost really just that. In order to be a good politician, you need to have a little gangsterism, because you have to think outside the box and you have to understand that the rules don't apply. But if you're a criminal, politics is a part of it, because you're always negotiating you're negotiating with other criminals, you're negotiating with people in the political structure so that you can exist. And so I thought it was interesting because we continue to see this in your work, not just Godfather of Harlem, but we've seen it in Narcos and some of the other TV shows that you've done. So is that an ongoing conversation that you're having, that you're having with yourself, that we get to be a part of, that we get to see?
Well, that's a great question. The funny thing is, you're pointing out that I guess I like to write about drug dealers.
Well, it's a part of American culture.
Well, it is, and I'm just like a gangster show freak. I love that stuff. And for the earlier part of my career, I had to write dopey network television to make a living, or scripts that were like designed to sell but were kind of stupid. And then finally I was like, well, why don't I just actually try to write stuff that I would want to watch? And of course, that led me to drugs. but the fact of the matter is, the crime intertwines with politics much more than maybe we would think or like to think. And so you're right. But it's funny because I don't think about it from the outside like that. I just trying to write what I'm interested in and write good scenes. And there's always anxiety and pressure and trying to do your best work. And I've been very lucky to have good partners and good writing partners, et cetera. So, but that's thank you for drawing that parallel between the two shows. I never thought of that.
Yeah, we love both of them.
Oh yeah.
I only worked on the Escobar portion of Narcos, and Godfathers really feels like a bit my baby with Paul. You know, it's really exciting to get I don't know if we'll get 60 hours, but let's put it this way: the show did really well this year. We're going to get a third season order.
I was about to ask that if it was going to be a third season.
Yeah, it should have happened months ago, and they were talking about happening months ago. Except it's business relationships between Disney and Epix. They're two separate companies, so there's a million details to work out, and those are in the process of getting worked out. I think in the next couple of weeks you'll hear about a season 3 renewal, and we're talking to them about a season 4. So we're doing well.
Yes,
I'm happy to hear that.
We are. The show is like one of the most well-written shows on TV, and the whole story of Bumpy Johnson. I mean, I've been interested in Bumpy Johnson since I saw the movie Cotton Club, which was what came out in the 80s, and that's one of my favorites that I watched over and over again.
Exactly.
Also Lawrence. Yeah.
That was my first. I had to tell my son who's younger, when I told him that, Lawrence Fishburne was Bumpy in Hoodlum. He was like, well, that's random, because he knows Forrest as Bumpy. And I said, no, well, actually it's not random, because he was Bumpy in Cotton Club. So,
That's really funny. That's funny. Well, I have a question or two for you guys, which is, what excites you about, what do you want to see in the third season? Oh, so I'll give you a couple, and let me tee you up a little bit. Okay, we have to deal with the Doogie that got burnt up, and that Bumpy sacrificed to go out to help Malcolm. Bumpy ended up sacrificing his dope, and I would think he would take his men to task. Like, how did Chance and Pettigrew let that happen? So we'll deal with that. The Italians are going to want their money. Chin is under indictment. Malcolm now sees that the forces against him are lethal. He now has viscerally experienced that. And we also historically fiddled around a little bit. Like, for example, Malcolm wasn't in Harlem on the day of the riots. And he was actually traveling to Saudi Arabia, the international trip he did that led him to London, a bunch of world capitals, Africa, et cetera, et cetera. So we didn't do that. We chose not to do that in season 2. So that remains. We think his trip to Saudi Arabia and his potentially some of his trips to other countries may be interesting to spend a few episodes dwelling on before he returns to announce the formation of his own Muslim Mosque Incorporated and Organization of African American Unity. So what do you guys want to see when you hear that?
Take it away. Who wants to start? I can't wait. Go ahead.
I mean,
I
don't mean to put you on the spot.
I'm happy to jump right on in.
This is
the spot.
Yeah,
this is the spot.
I don't know if you've seen the Blood Brothers Netflix documentary on Malcolm and Muhammad Ali's relationship too. And I know you guys have already introduced the Malcolm and Muhammad Ali relationship. So I think that, building up to the point where they separate and everything. I remember hearing that that Muhammad Ali said that was one of the biggest regrets, that they weren't on good terms when Malcolm.
That's exciting.
That build up Muhammad Ali, the whole draft, the Vietnam situation, the whole thing with Muhammad Ali, and the mentorship of Bumpy and Frank Lucas. I don't know if that's season 3. Maybe that's going down the line.
Well, the Frank Lucas thing, I think maybe we hold off a bit. That's my instinct, but who knows? And then in terms of, I think that's all great stuff. I think the idea of Malcolm and Clay. I read the book Blood Brothers that probably that documentary is based on, which described their relationship. But it's funny. I don't think I read the part of the book that about their specific split, and I think that's a very good idea to explore that and to carry that on. Excellent.
Well, his Doogie line basically is gone. So I'm thinking, what if there's a connection in Western Europe for Bumpy?
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, something that it's taking him a little farther out, and I'm thinking that there could be some connection in Western Europe that would get him back on track. The French are gone, so he can't deal with them.
Well, hold on. Why are the French gone? He bought the huge shipment of dope. He paid them off.
Mm-hmm.
He just lost the Doogie on his end, and he owes the Italians.
He owes the Italians, but
why can't he just raise another quantity of money, get in touch with 98, and get another re-up?
It's possible. I just think that with 98 and
Luanda said that.
Huh?
Luanda said that in the last review. You said he paid for it up front. That was his Doogie that got burnt up.
Exactly, but
you're right. Luanda did say that. I remember now. She challenged you, Ron.
But what you find though is the turmoil, and if I were 98, I would be a little more concerned with some of the things that he's having to deal with. There's a lot on him.
No question.
And
no question.
If he doesn't do that, then he has to become more political. And I think.
Well, let me ask you this. You said, okay, well, the reason I'd be resistant to he's now finding a connection in Western Europe is none of us know the name of that connection. Like French connection, you go, okay, I get it, the French connection. Mm-hmm. But like the Netherlands connection, we don't know about that. So for me, I go, I need something. How about the Westies? What about the Cuban mob? What about the Cuban mob coming in from Jersey City?
Yeah.
You know, like I need something that's big and shiny.
Okay, I digress. That sounds even better. I like that idea.
Which would you prefer, the Cubans or the Westies?
I prefer the Cubans.
What about you?
I don't, because I'm thinking about Frank Lucas. So where does he get the idea to go to Asia? I guess in the movies, you know, the idea for him to go to Asia was that he had a relative or something who was in Vietnam, and so they knew that was the connect. So is that too early to think about that?
You're so smart. You're very.
She is.
You're very smart. No, it is not too early to think about that. Because who's to say, okay, explain to me in the movie how he had the Asian connection?
I think he had a relative or something that was in Vietnam. And so that's how they made the connection.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and
well, as far as I know, that relative must have been very, very close to Bumpy Johnson.
Yeah, I was thinking about that, but I was also thinking about, in terms of money, one of the things that Bumpy is always thinking about is being independent and not owing anyone or having somebody own him. So I don't know if he's ever put in a situation again where he has to take out a loan. That's a place that's very uncomfortable for him. So if he has to either go back to the Black bankers or to some outside source for money, I think that's going to create conflict for him. Because we've seen before, he doesn't like to be in that position, and it always puts him against the wall trying to pay that debt off.
That's correct. What do you think about the Black bankers and the Lenox Hill Society we introduced? What did you guys think of that?
They're so shady.
They were snakes. They were snakes. They were just as gangster as Bumpy was.
Well, I mean, what would
but that's
you
the
think
political
about...
side, though. That's
right.
That's that political side that Bumpy had to get closer to. And
okay, well, Ron, does it interest you to see continued dealings, conflict, etc., between Bumpy and the Lenox Hill Society guys?
Yes.
Oh yeah, because I think it becomes a class issue, right?
Exactly. There is right, and not only that, you know, we see Bumpy getting into a whole different spectrum than, you know, just dealing with the French and the Italians. So, and I think Malcolm X said it, that he has, you know, he said something about a gangster has to be more political, and the political guy has to become more gangster. And I think that statement didn't just fall on deaf ears. It's going someplace. And I think that would be a good start for Bumpy in season 3.
How would you define political as it regards Bumpy?
Well, when I say
in other words, does that mean, Ron, that he's, for instance, funding, you know, high class events where Harry Belafonte and Sidney Poitier are going to come? Does it mean he's actually attending the gathering civil rights meetings and showing a keen interest? How do you do that when you're also trying to run a business? What does it mean to you?
Well, Mamie has already given him that avenue. So, you know, he can actually join in with Mamie in some circumstances. So Mamie already has that avenue open for him. So I think that's a great avenue to take, you know, for Bumpy. So it's not a hard sell to move in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think maybe when it comes down to it, they become more about the money than Bumpy is, right? They see him as a resource that they can continue to tap for whatever their special cause is.
Yes, yes. Well, we show at the, you know, poor Ernie meets his doom in the United Bank of Harlem. Right. And so we're, you know, we were thinking, man, maybe we can do something with the United Bank of Harlem, you know, because the United Bank of Harlem is owned by by one of those guys, so, you know, we might have some fun with that.
And you know, you mentioned Ernie's death, and we have this ongoing conversation about, you know, could all of this have been prevented if Ernie and Stella provided more context to Vincent when they were telling him why they had to kill Benny? And so we go back and forth about that. Is there a reason why that detail, where they kind of just said we killed him but didn't explain why?
I would say this, we literally had some, this is one of these interesting things that's from a producerial standpoint. There were some scenes we weren't able to shoot because of medical or COVID or what related problems. Like if I could, I mean, I can't express enough how tough it was to shoot in COVID and how tough it was to get it done, and the bravery of the whole crew and everybody like pushing forward, wearing these horrible, not only masks, but like plastic shields across your face all day. It was 10, 12 hours a day. It was crazy. So we ended up having to drop some scenes very reluctantly. And, I knew it at the time, but I hoped we could skate through. But there were a couple of Stella Ernie scenes we couldn't shoot and maybe even Stella Ernie Chin scenes we just couldn't shoot, that we had to like leave them out. And I think had we shot them, you would have had more of a fuller sense of context.
Okay. Well, I was just mentioning, that regardless of, the scenes possibly, getting cut, I think that the season still went off without a hitch. I mean, I don't think we noticed, a difference between, pre-COVID and post-COVID throughout this whole season. So it was still done phenomenally. It was just like an ongoing argument we were having. We were like, surely Vincent would have understood if Stella told him that he had to kill Benny, he was threatening her life.
But the other thing too, the other part of that argument was, does Stella really love Ernie? And so we had that back and forth too, because at points we couldn't believe that she did. And although the last episode before he was killed, and the fact that they got married, was that a marriage out of convenience, or did she? Well, I know it was, but was there some more in there emotionally for Stella than she let on?
Well, you know what? That's a question that maybe we have to resolve later. In other words, maybe I can't tell you that right now.
Okay.
If she seems opaque, hard to figure out, then maybe that's a good thing. Maybe answers will come in the future.
Okay. Okay.
That's a good response.
That is a good response.
I got one question though. What are some of the common mistakes screenwriters make, and what would you like to see more of from screenplays? Well,
I mean, I can mostly talk. I write movies, but it's mostly TV shows, and in general, I guess what I'm about to say applies to both feature films and TV, which is you've got to write a script where very early on you're setting the context of the world. You're making it exciting. You're bringing me in, whether it's a contemporary movie or a period piece, you're bringing me into a world that's interesting. And sometimes screenwriters move along with a story and they don't spend enough time getting me, the reader, set up to then enjoy what follows next. You need a proper setup. And you also need to have characters who want things. A character's want over the course of the whole movie is what drives the movie. A character's want in the course of a scene is what determines the drive of the scene.
Excellent.
So for instance, Rocky wants to win the world championship against Apollo Creed. He has a want that whole movie. Mm-hmm. The brilliance of that movie is how they subvert the common thing, which is, and he wins. Mm-hmm. But the way that script was written, it was set up that, even though he's going to actually lose the fight, which of course he would to Apollo Creed, by not getting knocked out, he's won. He's won his own self-respect. So that was a great inversion of how to not make it a cheeseball movie where like Rocky ends up somehow beating Apollo Creed. So really it's that it's giving characters drive and want, and we search for that in every episode. It's sort of like, okay, well, Elise, what does Elise want to do? Elise wants to tell Margaret the truth. How is she going to deal with that? She's going to tell, and she's inspired to do that because she's talking to the young woman, Sandra, played by Forrest Whitaker's daughter, True, who says, talks about Bumpy Johnson's doogie and is about to have a child, and that inspires, Elise to, anyway, that want drives that entire storyline, leading to the conclusion when Bumpy finally admits to Margaret that he's her grandfather.
Wow. Excellent.
And that was a touching moment too. And I had a question for you just about the entertainment industry in general and breaking into it, because it seemed like such a distant thing, a while ago, something that seems so unattainable for many. But it seems like now people are really creating their own lanes and using untraditional platforms to break into the industry. Do you have any thoughts about that? And does that allow for more diverse storytelling and people to tell the stories that they want to tell?
Yeah, first of all, 100% yes. I mean, for instance, look at you guys. Like, this is as well produced as an episode of 60 Minutes. Your budget is lower, that's for sure. But in other words, I'm engaged in a television interview that's like every other professional television interview I've ever had. By a group of people who decided to come together and put on their own show. And what's interesting about that is your commentary is, in this particular case, is watched by the writers just by out of amusement. It wasn't like, oh God, we got to study everything they said. And it was like, but then as we heard you guys speak about it, it was like, okay, this is actually valuable in writing is a funny thing. It's a triangle. There's the writer, there's the characters on the page, and then there's a third entity. It's you, the viewer, the reader, what have you. And so actually what my job is as a writer is to manipulate the characters on the page so that they manipulate you into emotions, into laughter, into sadness, into like shock. And so that's actually the way I approach it. I'm a little bit cold-hearted about it. I go, okay, how am I going to make Bumpy do something that makes LaWanda comment about it in the next episode? Fundamentally, I want to affect the viewer. And so to watch you guys do it it shows the value of what you're doing. On every other level, I say to young artists, creators, filmmakers, etc., you guys have tools that I never had growing up. If I wanted to shoot a film when I was 24 years old, I'd have to spend $125,000 getting a crew mounted to shoot a single day. I didn't have anywhere near that kind of money. I didn't have $10. And so, but you have a tool in your hand. An iPhone 12 can shoot a beautiful movie. Movies that have been at Sundance Film Festival that were shot on an iPhone. Yeah. In other words, everybody now, there's a democratization because of technology of the means of production. So go shoot a badass little film. Chances are the production value is going to be way less than the $6 million we spend per episode on GodFather of Harlem. It's even more than $6. And so at the same time, people can get discovered this way. And even more so, what it helps you do, I didn't become a better writer because I couldn't visualize scenes in my head. It was all kind of a math equation to me. What do they want? Okay, what's the opposition to the want, etc. But when my stuff started to get shot, I now could picture, oh, the director has to shoot this angle here. Oh, I'm watching these guys shoot. Now when I was writing, I could imagine the actors on the set and I could position it and I'd even write their movements a little bit. In other words, it was much easier for me to visualize. Well, now with this technology, you guys can go out and be shooting stuff you wrote and doing scenes and learning, and which will help your writing. Mm-hmm. In other words, people go out and most of your first efforts are going to be kind of terrible in terms of how the public receives them because they're amateur efforts. Mm-hmm. But the more you do it, the more you learn and the better you get at it. And the GodFather of Harlem is very interesting because despite that high budget, it's high sounding budget. It's actually kind of a low budget. They spent 13 million on The Crown. Mm-hmm. 15 million, 20 million sometimes. So, and to be honest, The Crown was my inspiration production-wise, when I started going to do GodFather of Harlem. It was like, you know what? When I watch The Crown, I'm pulled into this world that I have no connection to, and that I'm gonna, and yet I'm living in it. And every detail is immaculate. And I'm watching this royal family. And GodFather of Harlem, I want to bring you into a world. I want to evoke Harlem of 1964. I want you to feel it, from the costumes to the way we shoot it to the 22 West sets and all that stuff. And so, you know, that's always the goal. It's always the goal.
Wow.
You know what?
Go ahead, Tiffany.
I was going to say, you know, I'm still tripping off the fact that he said that he had to sell Forrest Whitaker. Like, Forrest Whitaker is an icon and an outstanding actor. And please let him know that we would love to have him on the spot.
Okay, I'll let him know. You know, look, I think that if you have a show going and you want to cast Forrest, they're going to say yes 100% of the time. But when you're going out to sell a show and asking a company to commit $50-60 million to making it, they say to themselves, okay, well, how are we selling this overseas? You know, is this guy a big enough movie star, big enough? Well, of course, they all know Forrest is well known around the world, but he's a 59-year-old Black man. That's less sexy than getting a 35-year-old famous white guy. You know, and it's easier to sell that guy. So, but the point is this: it's just I'm not even throwing stones at some inherent racism in the business. It's though that exists in certain forms and doesn't in other ways. But I'm talking about just, it's tough to get someone to commit $50 million to you, Forrest Whitaker or not.
That's true. That's the
People lose their jobs when those things don't work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's real talk.
So when you talk about the international market, I mean, when you think about technology making it easier for filmmakers to get started, but would you also say that it's making the world a smaller place and easier to tell more universal stories because you're able to access those international audiences? So one, you can export American entertainment, but you can also import these stories from all around the world easier now. So are you finding that is making it easier for you to, I guess, find these storytellers all over the globe?
Oh my God! What another great question. I was just in a television festival in Lille, France, and that's exactly what we were talking about. The fact that these streaming devices and all this stuff. I mean, look, this technology, social media, and everything else has a super dark side as well as a super bright side. One of the bright aspects is that it has done that. It has once again democratized the spread of shows. It's easier to get a show that you want to see that's in Russian, that has subtitles, than it was 10 or 20 years ago. You almost couldn't get it 20 years ago. And so, yeah, that's exactly what it's created. And I met some writers in Middle Eastern writers in Lille, and I'm like, I got to send Malcolm to the Middle East. And these guys, I think, are really cool, gritty writers. Maybe I get them to, maybe I bring them aboard. And so the answer is a resounding yes. It's made the communities, it's made the links between the different communities closer and easier to share things than ever before. I mean, who would have thought Fauda? That's a cool, super cool Israeli show. The Israelis make great shows. I mean, there's dozens of others. The French have the Bureau. There's just lots of great shows that I would never have known about in my earlier career that now I'm exposed to. So yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, we want to be conscious of your time. Do you have time for maybe one more question or?
I do, okay. Of course.
All right. Well, I just wanted to ask you just, about your career. You worked with a lot of iconic actors and actresses, and I was wondering if there, or even like behind the scenes, you work with Paul Eckstein a lot, and so I was wondering with that, with being able to work with all of these great creatives, is there anyone that in particular that you have a special memory with, or even another question, is anyone that you want to work with that you haven't yet?
That's a lot of questions in one question. I'd love to work with Hugh Jackman. I had a meeting with him. He's a really nice guy, and he seems like he'd be really fun to work with. But I'm open to working with anybody. I mean, for me, it's hard to even pick out one memory, though I certainly can. And you move through your career, and you have these intense creative, powerful experiences with these people, oftentimes of extraordinary talent, by the way, whether they're famous or not. I've just seen some phenomenal actors. And to be honest, when you're there trying to do your show, yeah, you care if it's Forrest Whitaker in selling your show. But what you care about on the day is the performance of the actor. And if Forrest is capable of giving a bad performance too. And so it's just, you know, I think about a moment. Paul Eckstein and I, there's a place in Los Angeles called the Beverly Hot Springs, and basically it's like a Roman bath. It's a huge hot tub with spring water from 100 feet below, like this fresh spring water that makes you feel like 10 years younger after you go in. And of course, there's a men's side and a women's side, and you go in naked. So me and Paul are in there when we had done the Hoodlum script, and we had it set up with Wesley Snipes for a year, and Wesley wasn't doing anything with it. So the rights came back to us, and Paul and I decided to go chill out and go to the hot springs. And we're in the hot springs, buck naked. And we look across the pool, and sitting there is Lawrence Fishburne. And Paul knew Fishburne from back in New York, you know, crossed paths with him a few times. So we literally like waded across the pool, and we're like, yo, hey, we started to talk, and we were like, hey, we have the script, we want to get you. And he said, yeah, send it over. And boom, there you go.
Wow.
He calls us and he says, I like it. How about we have Bill Duke do it? I'm looking for something to do with Bill. Well, you know, miracle.
Talk about the stars aligning.
Yeah.
And that movie is so great. It had the great Cicely Tyson and Tim Roth, and oh my goodness. I mean, I never get tired of watching that movie.
Ms. Tyson was amazing. She knew that Stephanie St. Clair was West Indian, spoke French fluently. And so she says to me, and I'd like to say all my lines in French.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, I did something along these lines. Ms. Tyson, you're one of the greatest actresses of our generation. And the film will be released in this country and of course all over the world, but English-speaking people need to get the benefit of your incredible talent. I basically got her to do the English and the French. So.
And she did it well.
She's great. She was great. She was so nice. She was so nice.
It seems like everything you touch turns to gold. I mean, I love your sci-fi flicks as well. The X-Files, Species 2 was actually, Species 1 and 2 actually were one of my favorites. First Wave. So
but hold on. I need to correct you. So, but thank you so much for that comment. But I can assure you, Ron, a greater percentage of stuff I touch turns to shit.
No way.
Are
you kidding me? You're only connecting with the things that actually made it through the tunnel. There's 10 times more things that didn't make it through the tunnel.
Wait, how about you working with Francis Coppola?
Well, that's a funny story. I went up. Yeah, it wasn't like we were. Trust me on this. It wasn't like we were like hanging out together every minute, and I was sitting up at his Napa mansion drinking wine. It was. I got his name stuck on the show to help sell it.
Excellent.
But I did get to meet him, which was very, very nice. But no, I mean, my point here is this. It's like you can either look at me as the guy who has a couple, successful shows, or you can look at me as the guy who has 38 failed pilots. Yeah, they both apply. So, and to be honest, that's a career. You have hits, you have misses, and that's the way it goes.
I think maybe
that's the best way to end an interview with Spot Talk.
Absolutely.
So
and we have enjoyed you so much, and I think your perspective and just your overall view is exceptional, and especially for the aspiring creatives. It doesn't always all work out, and everything doesn't go around the first time, so I'm sure they will appreciate that perspective too.
Look,
especially not at the beginning. Well, you guys. Oh, go ahead, Tiffany.
I was going to say, I appreciate you saying that, because I just wrote my first pilot. So I am in the editing and rewriting stage now. So I
Good.
am soaking up everything that you said during this interview.
Good.
Right.
Well, you guys are such a pleasure to talk to and also to watch. I love your show. It's just, again, it's really helpful to us, and we will keep watching.
Well, thank you so much for
Thank
your support,
you.
and we will also continue to support you in all of your future endeavors.
Okay.
Thanks a lot. We appreciate your
Thank you.
time today.
Thank you.
It was golden.
Really
Thank
enjoyed
you.
it.
Golden opportunity.
Tell
Bye-bye
your
now.
dad I said hi, Tiffany.
I will. Thank you for this interview.
Definitely.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Money coming, money go. I've been at it on the low. Trapping out a while live. I can see the leaders doing, let's be talking plans and maybe seeing you. Pull up on you, let me scoop. Nobody here but me and you. Got a little ring to it, turn that thing fluid in the coupe. Way you look, I know it's real. I'm on my shine. I've been really getting feel. You know why I'm here, don't act like you don't know how I feel. But let me tell you what you mean to me. Slide on me for that mean greet. Vibe with me under moonshine, sipping moonshine to the new sky. Sage toasted and be raised soaked in the raincoat. Hit the waves quota, I be flossing, I be locked in. I was lost here.